Hey, let's talk about games. Hello there, my friend. Welcome back. It's Hydra here. Today we're going to be talking about the Psyker class again, but we're going to be talking today about how damn versatile this class is. I really think that calling it a class is a little bit misleading because it's really like 5 classes in one. Let me go into a little bit of a detailed analysis today, and we're going to go through some build ideas as well. Some ideas for some really janky stuff that you may not have thought of, and I trust you that this is going to be fun. Now, Psyker class obviously was sold to us as a mage-like character. We got our AoEs, we've got our fire shields, we got our blinks. Very, very stereotypical mage-like stuff. Loads of fun to use and massive damage outputs. Okay, we've got the mage class covered. So, what else can we do? Well, we've also got the sort of the warlock class available to us. We can do slows, we can do stuns, we can have an entire build revolving around bleeds and dots. Really, the two things can blend together in a lot of games, but a lot of people will be able to differentiate between a mage and a warlock. Now, granted, we don't get too many pets, but we do get a fire pillar that follows us around. I guess that kind of counts. More importantly, though, I want to talk to you about the bard. Now, a bard within the game is normally the buff character. You follow others around and you make others better. It's not a healer. It's something that makes people do more damage, take less damage, gives them utility, breaks them out of stuns and such. And the Psyker actually fills this role in this game very well. What I'm going to be doing in this video is talking you through 2 of the builds I've tried thus far and showing you a little bit of footage as to how we've used them and how much, well, fun it's been basically to see what we can come up with. So first build here is designed to be played with an assassin. This build is basically aimed to make their kinetic damage as high as possible. So starting from number 3, we've got Fiery Form, which will give them 20% more damage to standard attacks. It's also quite helpful if they are using a heat-based weapon, so the Hotshot Las Rifle works incredibly well because you're going to get 50% extra damage. Then moving along, we've also got Foreboding, which is another 50% damage to kinetic attacks. Also useful if they're using a kinetic, so if they're using a standard sniper, they'll get the 50% plus another 20 here. It also lasts a fair while and helps a little bit with shot spread, so if they were going to use something like an autogun or a bolt rifle, they could be spamming their full auto with a little bit more damage. Now, moving on from here, we have Divine Shot. Now, Divine Shot is very misleading. The tooltip does not really sell what this actually is. The first hit on a target provides 70% damage bonus. Full stop. This buff lasts for 15 seconds. It really needs to be written to the first hit on a target is provided with a 70% damage increase. This effect lasts on your weapon for 15 seconds. Yeah, no, I've not done it right again. God lord. It's actually quite hard to explain, but for 15 seconds, you more or less apply a single-use poison to yourself, or to an ally in this case, and the first ability they do will use that. The buff does not last, the damage rather does not last for 15 seconds, so one ability will get 70% damage. However, you can still make use of this, trust me. Now, last one, we're going to look at Misfortune because, well, ignoring 40% of armor with a piercing weapon, basically you can either totally bypass armor or just get rid of a lot of it from someone, and the amount of damage that it increases your allies' damage by is a lot. It is a lot. So for all of these, I've got, you can see all these purple runes here I've had to unlock via the Psyker combat tree. We have things like Apply to Allies, Symbiosis, we have Increased Damage, we've got that scattered around on a few now. I've not actually tested if these stack yet, I'm working with the assumption they do, but we've got a total of an extra 40% damage if it does. All of these will be applying to an ally. Now, you might be wondering how this works. It always gets cast on your nearest ally, so you want to be standing near the person you want to buff. There's no targeting system in this that's going to be like an MMO or something like that, pressing F1, 2, 3 to target someone. It's just going to be a case of walking around up to the person you like, smack it on them, there you go. It will not cast it on yourself when you have Symbiosis, even if all of your allies are dead. Something worth noting. So, checking out the footage from here, I've been showing it to you in the background here a little bit as we go, but although you can't see the damage here. This is a sort of a standard or plus 100 difficulty mission, so a little bit tough. We're doing a little bit less damage. However, Lilandra's hitting for up to 14,000 damage on a target, and that's not even with a critical hit, but that's the highest we managed to get thus far with a fully aimed shot with all of these buffs applied. Now granted, we had to be in team comms in order to sort of synergize Divine Shot to make it do as much damage as it could. But what I'm showing you here is that it's really interesting. You could potentially buff 2 characters with this. Now, some of you might be wondering, Hydra, these things don't have a particularly long buff duration. How are you keeping them up on people? Well, we go over to our skills over here. You go to the movement tree and Psychic Prod, which really needs a nerf, to be honest. It's so good. 10% faster cooldown to psychic skills already on cooldown when force weapons are used stacking. Every time you use this, your cooldown gets reduced by 10% of the total cooldown, not 10% of the remaining cooldown, which I kind of think is what it should be. But for now, it's incredibly good. Spam this about 5 times, just basically auto-attack thin air if you need to, and you're going to have your next weapon ability available. So, in terms of other Battle Bard builds that we could be doing, if we go back to our psychic powers over here, number 2 build is a simple prevent your ally from dying, or prevent your allies from dying. The first ability, which lasts on them forever, is this, Death Augury. I don't know if I'm saying that right. It's going to be a permanent buff as well of movement speed plus damage increase, which is nice, but when they die, it brings them back to life on 50% life, 50% suppression. Very, very handy. As well as that, I've gone for the absolutely classic precognitive dodge, and yes, you could go for precognition as well, which is fairly good, but if someone's being attacked by an autogun, it disappears so fast. It's got its place, it is good. And by all means, you could probably put precognition on here. You could cast Death Augury on someone and then swap to your second weapon set. You could have 2 weapon sets just of buffs. That is not a problem at all, so I could probably rearrange this to make it a bit more efficient. You could definitely go with warp speed, but I've gone with endurance just to give a little bit of extra damage reduction. But again, it's also going to give a little bit of extra movement, and I did go for the duration on this because it is only 10 seconds. Making it 15 does make my life a lot easier to keep it up on people. Likewise with Fiery Form, I also went with the skill duration on this just because it's 10 seconds and 15 is so much easier to keep up on people. Now, what I was hoping for was being able to apply vulnerabilities using Fiery Form, being able to apply life on hit. You can't really. You can buff someone, but this isn't an offensive spell, so for those of you that were tempted by that, doesn't work. But if we take a little look at the footage here, I'm basically buffing my Crusader, turning him into an unstoppable whirling form of death. The Fiery Form damage really can't be sort of understated. The actual stats on the screen, when you look at it go in combat and you've got someone that's actually standing toe to toe with an enemy, it's doing the job of a whole nother person automatically. The fact that you're running around buffing people more than attacking really doesn't matter too much, because all of this damage coming out from Fiery Form from someone that's tanking dreadnoughts and doing whatever, as well as the extra mitigation they get, I mean, they're not going to die either. They are not going to die. They have 20% damage reduction from one ability, another 20% from Fiery Form. They've got another 40% range resist. They've got all these things, and if they spec a little bit tanky too, they are never going to die. And guys, this was just a little bit of a video to talk to you about what I think is one of the most exciting moments for the combat of Inquisitor Martyr, and that is that I think maybe even unintentionally they've created a role system, although currently we only have one class that fills sort of traditional roles. No, that's a lie. We've got 2, because we've got traditional damage and we've got traditional utility, battle bard, etc. We don't have a tank quite yet because we don't have a taunt. And having put all of this stuff in, I kind of feel like now there has to be a taunt. There are some games where it's sort of every man for himself, it's an ARPG, you don't necessarily have to have a role-based combat system, but many ARPGs do, and it works quite well. I think it would work well for Martyr as well, because as we talked about the power level system, it does favour group-based play, it favours community-based content. Getting some stuff, some party buffs going on, getting some stuff that And this isn't going to detract from the single player game at all. It's just you have a buff that you apply to yourself, but it also applies to party members. Something like that. It's within Diablo, Path of Exile. All games have got stuff like that, generally. I think Martyr's going to need a few more. In particular, Taunt, AoE Taunt, Single Target Taunt, aggro management for the Crusader would be incredibly handy, just to make things a little bit more interesting, and I really do think it would. Guys and girls, I want to know what your Psyker builds are. Are you tempted by this? Are you tempted by doing 14,000 damage and killing a pretty tough opponent in one hit? We've managed to take down a Sentinel in one hit as well at a neutral difficulty with an aim shot from a sniper rifle. Pretty darn good fun. Guys and girls, have yourself a great weekend, and don't worry about that interview. I'm afraid it's been pushed back to next week. Reason being, though, is there's some information the developers want to give me, but they need a few more days to solidify their answers because they really can't commit to saying anything unless they're absolutely sure. But this will be the first you'll have heard of much of this information. So, once again, have yourself a great weekend. Keep an eye out for the streams too, and shout out to Harmon and Lalandra for helping out a couple of the Patreons for filming this. Guys and girls, have a great weekend.